Hi everyone, Alex Tardy here, meteorologist with Weather Echo. And 32 years with National Weather Service at 6 different locations, including the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region. Hey, we've got a weather insight for you. So strap on your seatbelt. You can play the whole thing, fast forward, or jump to your favorite section. So what we're looking at here, besides a major winter storm for the South and Mid-Atlantic region this coming weekend, is the potential return to wet weather in the far west after 2+ weeks of dry conditions and return to Thule fog. So we're going to take a look at things pretty close for late January, February, and even beyond. Hope you enjoy this weather insight. All right, percent of average precipitation. This is an important map here. On the left-hand side is 30-year normal, and this is observed precipitation since October 1, the start of the rainy season, start of the winter, start of the water year. You don't need to be a meteorologist to see it stands out in southern central California, much above normal. We had 2 big episodes, one in mid-November before Thanksgiving, one late December, early January. But also the far northern Rockies, northern plains has been very wet as well. Now, look at the rest of the country, especially Texas, the plains, and the southeast, very dry conditions. And part of that area is going to see a lot of precipitation in the form of snow and winter weather conditions this coming weekend. Now, the right-hand side, 30-year averages compared to what we've seen so far. Why do the mountains stand out so much? Well, because we've had an upper-level ridge, a warm dome. That warm dome is actually what's causing the fog and cooler conditions in the Central Valley. I know, not necessarily intuitive. That's an inversion. If it was summertime with a high sun angle, we would not have the same effect. It would be scorching in the Central Valley. Now look at the Northeast, colder than normal. So we've had a persistent weather pattern, and you can even see the lake effect precipitation in the Great Lakes above average. So this cold, persistent pattern in the Northeast has resulted in a lot of lake effect precipitation. So very important to look in your rear view mirror before you look forward. Okay, snowpack, very important. Let's start with the west because it's most important there for water supply and drought. We've actually got snowpack above normal in the southern Sierra Nevada. The Sierra Nevada, by the way, in Spanish is snow-covered mountains. So that's why we say Sierra Nevada. We don't leave it off. The lower elevations, though, below average. And a lot of the mountains in the west are below average, even though we see the northern Cascades above average there. What really stands out as well is the Wasatch and especially the Rockies in Colorado. Those areas are less than 70%. A lot of that area is 50 to 70% or half compared to what it should be. So snow drought in that region. Now look at the Great Lakes region standing out with the snow there. That's all lake effect precipitation. Much above normal in Lake Superior, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie. Just pretty amazing how persistent the cold air pattern has been generating all that lake effect precipitation. Snowpack. Okay, the jet stream. This is more important, and we'll talk about why. This jet stream is very powerful in the Western Pacific right now. Japan and Asia, far to the west. Now, it's been anchored in that region, and no one really knows why it won't shift to the east. But what I'm showing you here in a nutshell, if you've got to go, is now and February 1. And we finally see some movement, not as far as we need it. We need it all the way to the west coast to not break down the ridge, but to be in that energy. So the ridge or the warm air is the result of this powerful jet stream. So whenever you have a persistent ridge, you have a powerful jet stream. Now the summertime, completely different. That ridge that we typically see, especially the Four Corners, is a result of the deserts and heating and the high sun angle. But in the winter, the ridge that we get is actually the result of this jet stream. You need that jet stream to be further east, otherwise you're going to get split, weak dynamics, we call it, dissipating atmospheric rivers, basically remnant storms, and that's all we're seeing across the Eastern Pacific. So we do see some movement. Now, what causes this movement? I don't really know, but this is critical to getting back into an active, significant active weather pattern is just jet stream. So it does shift east slightly. Okay, This is a little more detailed. This is an ensemble of one model, so many model runs. You can see there's a lot of players coming up with the storm in the South and Mid-Atlantic region, including the Southern California upper low and the Baja upper low. That will be a factor, believe it or not. More air coming down from Canada will be a factor. And the main cold pocket or Hudson Bay low that's sitting over the Northeast. So all of that, those three different areas are going to come together potentially to bring a big storm. Now, why don't we know exactly where the heaviest snow or where the freezing rain and sleet, and yes, sleet, California doesn't get sleet. Mixed rain and snow is not sleet. But sleet is melted snowflakes that refreeze due to cold Arctic air in the low levels and makes these little pellets. But where it actually forms is not necessarily known, and it's typically not known until right up to the storm because you have so many different players developing that precipitation line, the snow, freezing rain, sleet, and rain line. Okay, when we go into this weekend, it looks like most of the energy will phase, including the energy coming out of the Baja, energy from central Canada, and then the existing energy. And that takes the swath across Tennessee, northern Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and then potentially pulling it up towards the Mid-Atlantic region and maybe even to Pennsylvania and far southern New England. So a very energetic pattern coming up for this weekend for what could be the biggest storm of the year, winter weather-wise, for the east and south. Okay, what about late January? Alex mentioned the jet stream is moving to the east. Well, don't hold your breath. It's moving slowly. And so when we get into late January, we still see the upper ridge over us because we're on the end of the jet stream. We're between the cold air upper trough in eastern Canada, and we're between the Gulf of Alaska upper low and that jet stream. So that's just the nature of the atmosphere, how it works. You always have an upper ridge. The storms don't care about the upper ridge. We've got to get the storm and the jet stream to swing through in order to get back into an active weather pattern. And that's potentially going to happen early February. Okay, speaking of early February, yes, we're still in an upper level ridge in the split pattern, but we make progress. So this elongated, powerful jet stream moves further east. Now, it's very rare. January 2024, we saw a jet stream like this extend from China all the way to San Diego, but it's rare for it to be this consolidated, this extended, and this powerful. So we got to get it to move because in only very rare situations does it not really move and does it able to extend from one side of the Pacific to the east side of the Pacific. Okay, this will also affect our atmospheric river potential. It looks like we have significant atmospheric river potential. I drew a line at 40 Northern California, late January, early February. Not just one, but a series of atmospheric rivers moving across that line and to the north with some potential to the south. Now the arrow here is the small atmospheric river that's going to develop, believe it or not, and be a player in the upcoming weekend snowstorm. That's the Baja atmospheric river from the upper level low that's sitting over Southern California right now. Okay, this is a difference map. So simply put, the green says the European model, not just one model run, but the European model and all the global forecast system US model runs, dozens of them. The European models are generally much wetter and further south, that 40 line in Northern California. So that's been a persistent trend. We've seen that even with the storms that we had in late December, the record flooding in Wrightwood, the storm we had January 1st, which was record flooding in San Diego. Those systems and atmospheric rivers, the European model was the first and furthest south with that activity. So maybe again this time, maybe. Okay, we see it clearly here on the right-hand side is the European ensemble. And we see some similarity, though. We see both models at the end of January have a little spike. That's the first atmospheric river, even though it falls apart, making it to Northern California. Then after that, we see a series. And you see some faint gray lines. Those are potentially stronger, moderate to stronger atmospheric rivers. So this is a huge range of solution over the next 2 weeks. But what we want to see is the general trend upwards, and this would indicate potential landfall in February of maybe more than one atmospheric river, at least for Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. Okay, the models are also very similar in late January, but it doesn't help us in California because these are powerful atmospheric river setup situations, or Pineapple Express north of Hawaii, an area that's been very active. And I visited Hawaii for over a week and had 3 different days of rain, even saw snow at 13,000 feet in the mountains. So the good news is that at least for the Pacific, where that powerful jet stream is, there's general model agreement with the atmosphere and with the atmospheric rivers. But the timing of if and when those make it to the West Coast finally in early February is where the disagreement is. Okay, and this shows here, we see on the right-hand side a lot of different squiggly lines. But in general, in late January, very close, Northern California, Pacific Northwest, and then of course it turns the corner. Now it's not just turning the corner because of the upper ridge. The jet stream is not moving enough to the east to push these along. So it's basically like if you had a fire hose and you were just too far away from it, you're only feeling sprinkles from the main center. Okay, now this is the outlook for February, and then we'll also look at March. I'm only going to show you the wet models because these are contrary to the traditional La Nina signature, which just doesn't work usually. Applying the current weak La Nina and then looking at past years and saying, well, this is typically what La Nina does for precipitation. These models are actually indicating a very active tropical jet stream moving into California, an active polar jet stream diving in the northern plains, and also meeting up on the East Coast. 2 different models, NCAR, National Center for Atmospheric Research out of Boulder, and the Canadian model, are predicting above average precipitation for parts of the West for February and for the Great Lakes region and the Northeast. Now, when we go into March, does it continue? And yes, at least the NCAR model is predicting wet conditions in the West. Now, you could easily be off by an entire state if you don't have this black jet stream line, either one of them, correct. So that's why forecasting, you don't hear much about beyond 2 weeks. It's difficult. A lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty grows tremendously. But nonetheless, contrary to traditional La Nina signatures that you might typically see and what like the climate forecast system is showing, dry conditions, you see this one giving wet conditions and above normal conditions for much of the West, the Rockies, the Great Lakes area, and the Mid-Atlantic region as shown here. So potential active weather may take some time, early February, but potential active weather returning in February and perhaps even in March. But notice this here. Generally easier to predict is that big dry area. That's the upper level ridge. And so it's not a block, but you see a split with the polar air to the north and the tropical air to the south. So they're not quite consolidated, but when they do consolidate, that can be big storms, whether it be in the East Pacific, whether it be in the interior U.S., like shown here. Hope you found this insight useful. We post more information real time on X and Threads, short videos on TikTok and YouTube. You can always sign up for the weather blog, and we put a lot of insights similar to this and recaps of storms on the weather blog. All right, everyone. Cross our fingers for some precipitation in the west. We need it because we need to avoid going into any further drought over the Rockies and the Great Basin region. And we've got to keep California out of a drought like it is now. Second half of the winter still to go, so a lot can happen in February and March. February is the wettest month on average for California. Take care, everyone.